For some serial killers, taking a life isn't enough. They also take photos of their victims, trophies and mementos that they can use to relive their murders. And some killers even used photography as a way to lure their victims in to begin with. For example, Rodney Alcala and Harvey Glattman offered to photograph their victims before murdering them. Others, like Robert Ben Rhodes or Jeffrey Dahmer, simply seem to enjoy using photography to document their vile crimes. Here is a list of 5 serial killers who enjoyed photographing their victims. Serial killer Robert Ben Rhodes roamed the highways of Texas in his freight truck, which doubled as a mobile torture and death chamber. Ben Rhodes was a long-haul trucker who converted the sleeper cab of his 18-wheel semi-truck into a small, makeshift sex chamber where he would torture his victims. Rhodes would rape his victims for weeks on end. Eventually, he'd kill them in the most brutal manner imaginable, a vicious cycle of kidnap, torture, kill. According to the numerous biographies and documentaries about him, Rhodes was also involved in the swinger and BDSM scene in Houston during the 80s with his wife. Eventually, Rhodes became a sadist who took his sexual fetish on the road. As he traveled throughout the United States using interstate highways, it's believed that Rhodes picked up and killed more than 50 people beginning in 1975, although he was only convicted of 3 murders. Rhodes was finally caught on April 1, 1990, after a self-admitted 15-year murder spree, when Arizona State Trooper Mike Miller found Kathleen Vine nude, handcuffed, and screaming in the cab of his truck. But Rhodes didn't get life in prison for that crime. His life prison sentence was for the death of 14-year-old runaway Regina K. Walters. Rhodes captured a bone-chilling moment where Walters appears to back away from him, clearly frightened. This photo of Walters was also used as evidence that he had held her captive for a long time, based on her hair growth and the bruising on her tiny frame. In 1994, Rhodes was sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole. Later in 2012, he pleaded guilty to the 1990 murder of a newlywed couple, 24-year-old Patricia Walsh and her 28-year-old husband Douglas Ziskowski. Rodney Alcala was known as the dating game killer because he appeared as a contestant on a popular dating show during his killing spree. He was described as a killing machine by investigating detectives, as he would strangle his victims, revive them from unconsciousness, and then strangle them again, repeating this twisted process until they died or he got bored. Alcala won his episode of the dating game as well as a date with Bachelorette Cheryl Bradshaw, but she refused to go out on the date with him because she said she found him creepy. Alcala is known to have killed 3 more women after his appearance on television. Alcala was eventually sentenced to death for the murders of 5 women committed in California between 1977 and 1979, although it's believed the real victim count could be as high as 130. This assumption was made after detectives found over 1,000 photos belonging to Alcala in his Seattle storage locker, many of the subjects in the photos appearing nude. In March 2010, the less explicit photos were released to the public in hopes of identifying the people in them. Thanks to some of the photos going public, Alcala was charged in 2016 with the 1977 slaying of 28-year-old Christine Ruth Thornton. Robert Bob Berdella, also known as the Kansas City Butcher and the Collector, was a serial killer and torturer who documented his sinister slayings in photographs. Between 1984 and 1987, he murdered at least 6 men in Kansas City, Missouri. After befriending his victims, sometimes offering them money or lodging, he kidnapped them and physically tormented them for days and weeks on end. He injected cock in their ears to deafen them, shot drain cleaner into their throats to diminish their ability to speak loudly, administered electric shocks to their bodies, and blindfolded them with bags over their heads. In the photographs that he took of his helpless victims, some of them were already dead. The bodies of his victims were then dismembered and either buried in his backyard or left in bags for the garbage crew to pick up. Berdella was caught after one of his victims, a 22-year-old male prostitute named Christopher Bryson, escaped on his 4th day of captivity. While Berdella was gone for the day, Bryson managed to break free from his restraints and jumped from a second-floor window wearing nothing more than a dog collar around his neck. Alongside the disturbing images, police also discovered human remains at his home, including 2 skulls and notebooks on torture. On September 20, 1988, 19-year-old Tara Calico disappeared near her home in Belen, New Mexico, when she failed to return from her regular bike ride in Valencia County. What was believed to have been a kidnapping soon evolved into a potential serial killer case after a chilling Polaroid was uncovered. 9 months later, a woman discovered a Polaroid 1,600 miles away, in Florida. It showed 2 apparent victims bound with their arms behind their backs and tape over their mouths. The young woman looked identical to Tara, and the boy was believed to be Michael Henley of Milan, New Mexico, who went missing 6 months before Tara when he was 9. Parents of both the victims were convinced it was them. Sadly, in 1990, it was discovered that the boy in the photograph was not Michael, as his remains were found, and his death had been a tragic accident. The questions surrounding the Polaroid are still unanswered. One of the most chilling theories online is that this was a photo from another serial killer's collection. This might very well be one of those cases that will never be solved. Soviet serial killer Anatoly Slivko played a disturbing game with his victims in an attempt to recreate his own twisted fantasy. In his early 20s, he witnessed a traffic accident that fatally injured a young boy wearing a Young Pioneers uniform. The Young Pioneers is like what we would call the Boy Scouts, but in Russia. The gruesome scene of the dead young pioneers sexually aroused him. 2 years later, Slivko started running a local children's club and took advantage of his position in the most sinister way imaginable. In order to satisfy his fantasies, Slivko would form close friendships with local boys, usually aged between 12 and 15, but never older than 17, and then lure them to the woods. Slivko would then trick his victims into believing that he was doing an experiment. The experiment involved a controlled hanging which would stretch the spine. He would then hang the boys from trees until they were unconscious. Once unconscious, Slivko would strip them naked, fondle them, and film them in suggestive positions. He also took photographs of the victims as they were asphyxiated. More than 40 boys were molested by Slivko, and he was unable to revive 7 of them, leading to their deaths. When police began investigating one boy's disappearance, several of the children complained they had suffered temporary amnesia from the things Slivko did to them. The photos and testimonies were enough to charge Slivko, and he was executed by firing squad on September 16, 1989. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please consider becoming a subscriber. Let me know what you thought about this video in the comments. I hope to see you soon.